Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. My name is Michael Pearson. I'm sort of the official host, I guess. Welcome to Fordham University, the 12th floor, where memories are made, so where human energy is channeled. I'm honored to be here with you all. Some of you I know, many of you I don't know yet, but I just want you to know, hopefully this is a start of a conversation. I'm just here to introduce the panel and Sheila Hassell Hughes, who has been a great partner and who's basically, I think, I want to sort of honor Ben Kassira, who is with us here doing air traffic control in different ways and bringing us together. And basically, the trustee of his human energy is Sheila. So Sheila, over to you.
Well, that's a mantle that is not easy to carry. Ben was our founder and my mentor, tragically passed a year ago. So we're here carrying his vision forward, and he pulled us all into this dynamic space and conversation and work, and we're excited to be here. So I'm here to transition us to our panel, and I'm looking around the room. I think Raj may have stepped out quickly, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a panel for about 45 minutes. And the goal of this panel is I don't have a lot of questions. I have one or two kind of broad questions, and I really have invited our speakers who bring such interesting, rich expertise and perspective to the conversation to have a conversation. So that will go about 45 minutes, and then we've left what I hope will be some substantial time for questions from you and for discussion as a room. We need to wrap up by 9, so that will shape how far we get. So I am going to invite the panelists to come and take a seat. I'll sit at the end here. There is a set of stairs on the left side there, so you don't have to high jump onto the stage. But I'm going to introduce my colleague, David Sloan Wilson, and invite him to introduce the panel. But first, let's go up and take our seats. Okay? Yeah, he stepped away for a second. He should be there. There he is. Raj, come join us. Yes, if you want water. Actually, Devin, would you mind maybe grabbing some water glasses?
Okay.
Raj is grabbing some water.
Raj is grabbing some water. So, where's the on button?
So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. David Sloan Wilson. David is a renowned evolutionary biologist, professor emeritus at Binghamton University, and founder of our partner nonprofit organization, Prosocial World. And I should know the tagline, evolving a future that works for all? No.
Close enough.
something close to that. A closely aligned organization. David is a member of the Human Energy Advisory Board and has been a key player in the development of human energy from its earliest days as a project of the Kassira Family Foundation, which it was for its first few years. So I am thrilled to have him here. David was instrumental in pulling this panel of people together, each of whom he has worked with in some context or another, and I'm very grateful for that. And so David is going to introduce our other panelists tonight.
That makes me the luckiest of people. And so it's a real privilege to be here, and thanks to you and Human Energy. And each of these individuals could occupy the entire evening. So Raj Sisodia is a co-founder of the Conscious Capitalism Movement, distinguished university professor and chair of the Conscious Enterprise Center at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, author of 15 books, most recently The Healing Organization and Awaken, The Path to Purpose, Inner Peace, and Healing. And so there's one awesome person on the stage here. And Jim Cohen, you are a professor of psychology and director of the Virginia Affective Neuroscience Laboratory at the University of Virginia, a clinical neuroscientist, and author of the forthcoming book, Why We Hold Hands. And if you want to have just a great video experience, Google Why We Hold Hands, Jim Cohen, and we'll be getting a small taste of what you do in the panel discussion. And Cornelia Walters, you are founder of POSE, P-O-Z-E, a global alliance for systemic change to benefit people and planet. You've worked with the United Nations in West Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and you're currently a senior fellow at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, where you write on prosocial AI in Forbes magazine, Psychology Today, and elsewhere. So what a feast. But we're going to have to binge eat because we only have 45 minutes. So I think that...
David, do you want to pitch 2 of your books?
No. I'm much too modest for that.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I want to be mindful of our time and jump right in. So I invited the panel, and in fact you all, to read a short essay on human energy by my colleague, neuroscientist Michael Jacob at the UCSF. And so I want to begin, though, by asking each of you, how do you come at the idea of human energy? What does human energy mean to you from your own perspective and from your particular area of expertise?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful group. To me, human energy has to be humane energy. I think for too long, human energy was a version of mechanical energy, right? I mean, most people were engaged in mechanical work. And then in the last century, we became sort of agents within a system of mass production and entirely focused on the economic aspect of living, for the most part, right? In the 20th century. And I think in this century, human energy has to be devoted to the flourishing of life, and not just human life. We have to take a multi-species perspective. You know, if you look at our record on this planet in the last 100 years, it is worse than any tyrant has ever imposed on any civilization in the history of this planet. We have become like an invading species that has destroyed virtually all other life. You know, 90% of mammals are gone in the last century, 95% of large fish are gone. We're living through the 6th mass extinction in the history of this planet, the first one since we've been around. Right? The last one was the dinosaurs. Species are disappearing at a rate of 100 times faster than they would otherwise if it were not for us. So we have been have had a devastating impact on this planet, while we've raised our per capita incomes quite a bit in the last century and extended our lifespans, and we've done some good things, but at what cost? And with what driving energy? And so I think all of our, there is no limit to human abilities. We have divine capacities. We're the only creature that can imagine and then manifest. Everything you see in this room first existed in a human mind, and that's true of all the built-up parts of this planet. But what are we imagining and what are we building towards? What is sort of the guiding energy behind human energy? I think that is what has to change. And if we do that, then there's no limit to how much good we can create and reverse, perhaps, a lot of the things that we have already destroyed. I think that's where, in my world of conscious capitalism, that is consciousness. Can we operate with a consciousness of recognizing the bigger picture, our interconnectedness, our interdependence, how all life is connected, and why we are here, what are we called to do as stewards? We're the apex species on this planet, but we've acted like an occupying force. And now I think we have to become the benign wise leaders of all life on this planet, and I think that's our role. And I'll just end on this thought. When we discovered how much energy existed inside a single atom, it literally blew us away, right? How much exists inside each of us? There's no limit, right? It's extraordinary what we are walking around. We have this divine potential and capacity which has not been deployed in the right directions, but I think we're getting to that now.
Yeah, I think human energy is on the one hand deeply personal and at the same time genuinely connective. And on that sense, it's the cause and consequence of twice four dimensions with aspirations, emotions, thoughts, and sensations at the individual level, and individuals as part of communities, countries, and the planet at the collective level. And that energy is, in the end, what is connecting these dimensions, both inside of us and between us.
I think when we look at human energy at the individual level, in a very everyday sense, we can all imagine the range of being just filled with energy, brimming with purpose, getting up in the morning with just zeal for what needs to be done on the one extreme, and on the other extreme being extremely slack, finding it difficult to get out of bed, or just wanting to avoid the world altogether. And so we want, what does it take to get to that state, that first state of just being filled with energy, not only individually, but collectively. And so I think the great secret and challenge is how do we find the conditions where we're brimming with energy, not only as individuals, but also as groups, which are fired up to do the right thing along the lines, Raj, of what you were saying. And I think that question has an answer. I think actually that we can understand the conditions where there's that degree of alignment of purpose, and that's exactly what we should be working towards.
Here comes the literalist. I take a very concrete, material, literal view of this question. I can't help it. It's what I do. I think of energy, human energy, in terms of fuel and work. How much work can we do, and how much fuel does it cost to do that work? I'm not talking about gasoline. I'm talking about glucose metabolism in your body. Your body is really expensive. Growing your body was really expensive. And it can do a lot of things. It can do a lot of work, but it won't surprise most of you that life can be really hard. It's amazing how much what you do, what we all do, costs in terms of metabolic metabolism, just metabolism. Your brain, this includes thinking, your brain, which is about 2% of your body weight, is consuming about 20% of your daily resting calories. It's enormously costly. What does all of this mean to me in my research? Well, one of the things that I study is how the brain takes social relatedness, social relationships, connection to others, and transforms it into better health and well-being. One of the things that I've learned is that it comes largely down to how each of us play a role in each other's lives, mitigating the cost in fuel, in glucose metabolism even, of doing the work that each of us has the potential to do. When I know that I can depend on you for part of the work that I need to do, say, being vigilant for danger, then I can take some of that work off of my own shoulders and devote it to innovative businesses or scientific ideas or health interventions. All of those things are work, and one of the things that I know, that I've learned without any doubt, is that each of us extends our potential for work by offsetting the cost of that work.
Four really distinctive perspectives, but I definitely see lines of continuity here. Connection, obviously, being a key one. So I want to start by asking, first I'll say, a few years ago, I stepped down from an academic leadership position and took a sabbatical, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. Did I want to do the same thing but with more resources somewhere else where I would be less stressed and so much happier, or do something quite different? And I worked with a professional coach who said something to me repeatedly that has burned itself into my brain, which is work takes energy, and your work had better energize you in return, or you will not have the energy to do the work and you will burn out. And I was like, man, am I burned out? Yes, yes, yes. So what is it that not only takes less energy, but actually energizes us? What are the conditions, David, in your term, that support, provoke, nurture human energy? How can we, together and individually, co-create spaces, activities, connections that generate greater energy for the humane work that Raj is talking about?
Yeah, we love what you said before, so keep on going.
All right, I'll start.
Yeah,
but
start.
Metaphorically and literally, we can start by standing next to each other, maybe even holding each other's hands. So I study hand-holding. I don't focus, the point isn't hand-holding. I look at how I was becoming that. I look at how hand-holding, the simple act of hand-holding, frees up cognitive and emotional bandwidth that costs literal glucose in your brain. So when that happens, that freeing of the bandwidth is energizing in the sense that you can now devote yourself, your thoughts, your more sort of metaphorical energy to the things that you find fulfilling. Maybe you might even call them optional or elective. But being afraid is not always elective. And life, again, just to remind you, is hard. And so by offsetting that cost with connection, we actually literally do energize each other. You know, I was saying this to someone earlier, but if you stand in front of a hill, you tend to estimate the hill as steeper than it actually is. All of us do that. We do that because, all else being equal, our brains would rather we didn't walk up hills. Because hills are hard relative to not hills, right? If we put a heavy backpack on your back, you'll perceive that hill as even steeper. That's your brain saying, really, don't walk up that hill now. It's much harder because the fuel you're going to spend going up the hill is more. But if we have your friend stand right next to you with that heavy backpack on, the hill seems less steep again. Other people, connection, trust, interdependence, literally frees up bandwidth. It gives you a different energy budget for your body, and that can feel energizing.
Yeah, I think it's the quest for meaning. It's the quest for a why that drives you to go further and beyond this North Star that is just projecting on the horizon and that is giving you the energy to strive for whatever seems impossible. And that has ultimately taken the civilization to the stage where it is today and where it's going to go, potentially.
I think you are actually channeling the spirit of Ben Kassira, because that phrase North Star, and the way you framed it is exactly how he would have talked about it. Raj?
So I think purpose, having a really burning purpose, does give you a tremendous amount of spiritual energy and fulfillment. So when I discovered my purpose, writing a book and sitting in the Poconos in Pennsylvania and suddenly having tears of joy when I'm writing about some stories of these companies and the deep humanity that they were showing. And I said, wow, I didn't know that such deep humanity and love can exist inside a for-profit business. And in that moment, I discovered my purpose. And from that point on, I was kind of on fire to spread this alternative story of business. So I was traveling 80% of the time, giving 100 talks a year all over the world. And, it was just a little manic. Manic, how you say that? And I was operating under the belief that if you are living your purpose, your work gives you energy, and therefore you can never burn out. And my students said, well, we would like to research that question. And they came back with a research report that said that purpose-driven people burn out at a higher rate than people who don't have a purpose because they go too far, and they sacrifice their mental, physical, and emotional well-being and relational well-being all at the altar of that purpose. And therefore, they will burn out probably, sooner than anybody else. So I think that was a wake-up call for me, that it's not enough to have purpose, that you also need to have that balance and take care of yourself mentally, emotionally. And those are all different kinds of energy. And over-indexing on any one of them is actually ultimately going to become the weakest link in our system.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things that's taking place here is that when we consider human energy, there's a purely biological level of description, that we are animals like many other animals. We have energy, and we must allocate it in different ways. And if we're living in challenging environments, then we have to reserve that energy for those things. But if we're living in some environments, then we're able to, the safe environments, we're well fed, we're not going to be attacked by predators or other people or something like that, then we have excess energy that we could use to build, because we are such a constructing species where we could actually build our environments. And along the same lines, I'll channel another one of our colleagues, Barbara Fredrickson, who has this notion of broaden and build. And this is true in many species, including ourselves, that when groups of people are safe and secure, they start laughing. And so we can actually think of laughter as part of this. When do you feel like laughing, and when is it no laughing matter? And so laughter is in fact something that evolved as a social signal that says, we're safe, we can relax. And by relaxing, we can develop things. We can develop our relationships. We can build stuff, and so on and so forth. So I think it comes back to safety, alignment of purpose, something that will greatly enhance our welfare, whether it'll help us to survive or help us to thrive. That when we're in that situation and we have that condition of safety, then we have excess energy. And that energy is not going to cancel itself out. It's all going to be pointing in the same direction, and then we get things done. So, and I love that the aspirational aspect of this fits so nicely with the purely physics and biological aspects of this, because I think that's getting close to you might say, a complete description.
So a word that hasn't been said, but that I feel like, for me, is kind of dancing around the outskirts here, is love. And we actually have a proposal out there right now for a project on the idea of love as an evolutionary engine. And you'll often hear parents and others talk about love as not being a limited resource, that when you spread more love, it doesn't run out. When there's more people to love, love grows and magnifies. Is that relevant to human energy? Or is human energy a limited resource that we must curate, care for, and allocate thoughtfully, and regenerate strategically through relationships, or does it become a boundless possibility?
It's both. It's not an either or. It's on the one hand, the more you give, the more you get. But I think it's also, and that's something that we spoke about before, it's the relationship, it's the commitment that arises from it. I give it, I get it, and it's the energy that's feeding the energy. So I think we can't look at only half of that equation.
I would say love is not something we do, it's something we are. And we are meant to be embodiments of love. One of the lessons I've learned in the last few years and from multiple sources, including some of my plant journeys and ayahuasca that I had in Ecuador, the message was very clear. I got this word called list. Here's the list for what the world needs in order to heal, and L is for love. Every single thing we do in this life should come from love. Every action, every statement, even if you have to let somebody go, the hardest thing you have to do, can you do it with love and not anger, fear, greed? Most business decisions come from fear and greed. Can you make the exact same decision but from a place of love? And what would that change? Because there are many ways we can hurt each other, and there's only one way to heal, and that is through love. And so I think we're called to manifest love in all of its forms, at all times, fundamentally. And then just to complete that acronym, so I was for innocence. We're all come into this world innocent. And then the world corrupts us in many ways. We get corrupted by the ways of society, even by our families. We learn to use our intelligence to lie and cheat and get what we want, to compete with each other. I mean, the whole foundation of our society is about competition in every dimension. We don't have a choice. We're born innocent and we get corrupted, but as an adult, you do have a choice, and therefore you must choose. You want to remain corrupted or you return to innocence? How can I live with innocence, which is not knowingly being the cause of harm or suffering for another, ever? S for simplicity, we make life too complicated, and T is for truth. Truth is so fundamental, and yet we've lost most of our connection to truth. Right? Truth is whatever is convenient for us to believe in this moment. So I just wanted to share that, but I think love is the fundamental element of that. And that's what differentiates a conscious business. Traditional businesses are just built on self-interest, which mutates into selfishness. Right? Self-interest is fine, selfishness is never a virtue, but somehow we've made that into a virtue. Conscious businesses are also built on love. Everything we do is an expression of our love into the world. A business is a way to scale caring into the world. In my normal life, I can only care for a handful of people. Through a business, I can care for 1,000 times more. Right? So when we do that, that releases energy in a level I don't think we even imagine. It's like unlocking that energy in an atom. Human beings can move mountains for love. And now we're not talking about physical energy, glucose, etc., but just all the other aspects of that. So I think that's when we are at our best, operating from love and with love.
I don't think it's divorced from glucose.
Sure, we need some glucose.
I don't know. James, do you want
Not yet. Nothing is divorced. To that point, I study how being in relationship, you could say, being in a state of love or having love, cuts the cost of being alive, and then that's true. And ultimately, the balance is on the side favoring love. But you could take my research, and people have, and extrapolate from it and assume that you should just add loved ones and friends and, continuously and until you explode into a plasmic cloud of joy. You just never get, but it's not like that. Other people are also investment. And in order to extract the love from a relationship, you have to invest of yourself in a way that can be hard. And one of the things that's most fascinating to me on the topic of love, if I can stay concrete, is that all right? Is the discovery that the love that we extract from our social worlds does not, including our sense of security, meaning the opposite of loneliness, feeling like we are secure in a social world, does not come to us despite the work of those relationships, the effort that they cause, the pain in the butt, the sharing the bathroom, right? To get really, really unglamorous. It doesn't come despite that, it comes because of that. That one of the ways, the brains are finicky and they like good evidence, especially when it comes to these kinds of questions. And the best evidence is that I've had to put work into this. This is something that's taken something out of me. That's good evidence that this is real. And I think I'm not sure what the lesson is there, but I think there is one.
I sometimes offer a thought experiment. Let's say you're a loving person, a real giver. Unluckily for you, you're surrounded by takers. And so the question is, what are your options? So option number one is you could leave. You could try to extract yourself from the situation. If that's not possible, you might try to change the people around you to cause them to be more loving people. You can turn off your love for the time being, just to protect yourself, just turn it off. Or you could continue to be loving and suffer the consequences. And who would counsel? Would any of you counsel the fourth option? I wouldn't. Okay, we'll have that for the Q&A. And what that illustrates, I think it's something that's so obvious but overlooked, the vulnerability of love. Bertrand Russell, supposedly a wise man, said, "Love is wise, hatred is foolish," he said. And that was foolish because it was unconditional. Nothing is unconditionally good. And I think that when you think of love as an extreme form of giving, and you think of it in a purely Darwinian sense, as a social strategy among others, and then what you can find is, and I think this is, ultimately a hopeful statement, and you can do this empirically, and of course, these are things we all know, that in the world, loving behavior has a distribution and abundance, to use in ecological terms. It does exist, thank heavens, but it's not everywhere. It's not everywhere, and that's because there were growth conditions for it in some places and not in others. And so this, I think, it was once again approaching it from a purely biological perspective, which lacks any kind of romance at all, but it actually is immensely useful information, because knowing those special conditions, which very simply are, imagine that same loving person who's surrounded by other loving people. Well, then they all do just fine, don't they? And so Adam Grant, your colleague in his wonderful book, Give and Take in the Business World, is who does the best in the business world, the givers or the takers? The givers do the best and the worst. The givers do the best when they're surrounded by other givers, and the givers do the worst when they're surrounded by takers. And then he provides example after example of that in the business. It's that simple. And knowing that, then we can actually arrange the conditions for love to succeed in a Darwinian world. And let's set about doing that.
Could I just add or respond as well? I think, first of all, loving others doesn't mean not loving yourself. So you have to love yourself. You have a duty to take care of yourself at the same time. So if you're depleting yourself to the point of exhaustion or even not surviving, then that's not what we're talking about. And then love and strength have to go together. Strength without love is tyranny, and love without strength is ineffective very often. So we have to cultivate both. We have to be founded in love, but we have to develop our personal power. We had many strong leaders in the world in the last century. They almost destroyed human civilization. The leaders who improved our world and changed it for the better were Lincoln and Gandhi and Mandela and King and leaders like that who blended strength and love. Very strong individuals, but founded in love. And that brings in the dimension of masculine, feminine. That each of us come from a mother and a father, but we've overdeveloped the masculine side, and most of human history, the feminine has been systematically suppressed, and women have been suppressed, and the feminine energies have been. And that's where I think we need to integrate both of those. We need to empower that love with strength, and we need to soften that power with love. So that combination, each of us can become a whole person, strong and loving. Martin Luther King said we must be tough-minded and tender-hearted. It's not either or. It's not saying I'll only be love at all times and let people walk over me. No, you're also strong. You have boundaries. You lean into necessary conflict. You are the peaceful warrior that stands up and fights when you have to, when you're supposed to, right?
So you would be saying we need agency as well as connection and purpose? Just to
Absolutely.
a
And
nod to our subtitle
yeah,
for
and
tonight.
I call it personal power. You know, Gandhi was never elected to anything and is never appointed to anything. He never held a title, and yet he had world-changing power. He was 5'2" and 90 pounds before he went on a hunger strike. Okay? And yet, look at the personal power that he cultivated from within. And that's available, I think, to all of us. And fundamentally, coming from a place of love is extremely important. The most
in which we can think about AI as offloading and freeing up capacity and human energy for collective, collaborative evolution of flourishing, or is it a threat to human energy? Probably both, but how might we, in the context of AI, cultivate the conditions that we've been talking about as necessary? You look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think I first want to pick up on what you said about agency. I think we're currently navigating a very dangerous transition from experimenting with AI towards integrating it, towards relying on it. And we're moving very speedily towards full-blown addiction. And I think something that is really important when we talk about agency amidst AI is the fact that all of us in this room had the luxury to grow up in a time and age where AI and ChatGPT was not omnipresent and where our brains had to evolve against friction. And the brain is a muscle. Use it or lose it. So that's number one. Number two, I think, yes, AI can be an enabler of human flourishing, but whether that happens depends on the human being that designs, delivers, and deploys the AI. And if it doesn't happen, then the problem is not the technology. The problem will be, again, the human being. So in that sense, and coming back, what could we do to make AI such an enabler? I think we should use this current AI hype that is swapping over society and that seems to be the label that is put now on every single box, is to take a step back and use that opportunity as an invitation to face our own humanity and to really start looking at those white elephants that we have shooed underneath the table because they were uncomfortable. And to think about what makes us human, what distinguishes our species, what has brought us to this point, and what will take us to the next level. And in that sense, and that's now something really practical, even though it's not glucose, I think we should use that opportunity to, for example, integrate double literacy. Double literacy in the sense of human literacy, a holistic understanding of self and society, and on the other hand, algorithmic literacy. Not just what's the latest tool and how do you prompt it, but what are the strengths, what are the limitations, and how can you harness it in complementarity to your NI, your natural intelligence.
Okay. My first thought is to just alert you all to the fact that other people were the original iPhone. And what I mean by that is that all of the things that we use the iPhone for, the multimodal processing information, the different kinds of information that it does, this is what we evolved to do with each other. We did not evolve to remember our own biography by ourselves. Our own biographies were remembered by our social networks. That's part of why it hurts when we lose part of our social network. We lose part of our own history. We distribute thinking, we distribute remembering, we distribute creativity, we distribute emotion regulation. We do all of these things not by ourselves with our own brain, but through our networks. Now, the other thing that's really interesting to know alongside that is that your brain, our brains, are very, very constant in terms of how much glucose they consume and how much blood is in them. If you add a little bit more blood to the brain than it can handle, you get brain damage. A little bit less, get brain damage. The flow of blood in our brain, the total quantity of blood in our brain is pretty constant, as is the metabolic rate, almost no matter what. Even when you're sleeping versus solving linear algebra, you have the same amount of overall load on your brain. It's just about what things the brain is doing. So, getting to AI. How many of you use a map app on your phone to get around? Everybody, right? Didn't used to. It's good research on this. You used to know your way around better. Especially those of you from DC, roundabouts. So we have, as a culture, started to outsource our mapping, our geographic mapping of territories to our mapping apps. Now, here's the thing. Our brains are now not devoting some of that energy to that cognitive activity, but our brains are never off. Our brains are never even less active overall. That means we're doing something else. We're doing something other than the mapping. Now, is it true that cab drivers in London have bigger hippocampus than non-cab drivers in London? Yes, it is, because they're mapping with their minds all the time. And brain is a muscle. You build that hippocampus so that you can find your way around. But that's just one thing that the brain can do. When we started using Google search, we started looking up things in encyclopedias less and maybe even not remembering things as much. When we start using AI for lots of things, I'm sort of playing devil's advocate here, but I think it's a real point. We're not just going to get dumb. We're going to stop doing certain things. We're going to stop doing some of the things that AI is now doing for us. But the overall metabolic load of the brain is not going to go down. It's going to be distributed to some other activity. I don't know what that other activity is, neither do you. But what? Cat videos. Strong candidate. But maybe it is, a creative activity. Maybe it is politics. I don't know what it's going to be. But what I do want to just sound the note of is that AI is not going to just turn our brain off.
That's so cool. I guess the contribution I want to make, and it's very much, I think, reinforcing yours, is that although AI is new in many respects, there's other respects in which it's not at all new. And it all comes down to social interactions. And so social interactions, again, depending on how it's structured, can go in a direction which is highly cooperative, good for all, ultimately the scale of the whole Earth. That is a possibility. Or it could go in completely the opposite, despotic, chaotic, dysfunctional direction. That's true with AI, and it's true without AI. And so we need to know the fundamentals of social interactions, whether the agents are human agents, computer agents, or some hybrid in between, and in order to steer the whole system towards cooperative outcomes. And so I think that's I think, basically encouraging, because it means that there's not some completely brave new world out there that we can't navigate. And so either way, it's our responsibility to build cooperative societies at a scale larger than ever before. And for that, I think we want to channel Teilhard de Chardin a little bit in a couple of respects. One of his famous quotes being comparing love to fire, basically, that the harnessing the energy of human love will be like the second discovery of fire. And the other being just this idea that there is going to be some global noosphere, basically, that human consciousness will expand to the global scale. There will be some kind of global superorganism, and that will never, ever, ever happen without technology. And so I think we need technology in order to cooperate at that scale. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen unless we understand the conditions for the evolution of prosociality in all its forms at all scales.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that, Jim, when you were talking about the way the story of our lives is held by other people, right? That all meaning, all thought happens in relationship. There is no thought that exists purely in my own mind, because it's always been formed in relationship and networks of relationship. And I was also reminded of my mother, who in her last days with dementia said, thank you for telling me these stories. You remind me who I am. That it's not just our stories, but our very identities, our very being that is held in those networks of relationship. And as technology expands those networks, our identities, our relationships, and our knowledge becomes this global noosphere, sphere of knowledge. Raj, do you want to speak to AI?
AI, the only thing I'll say on that, the more powerful technology, the greater the importance of the consciousness with which we use that technology. Whether it's nuclear bombs, airplanes, right, and now AI. And so we have to have not only ethical principles, but going beyond that, So we had written for my book, The Healing Organization, we had written a healing oath, just like the Hippocratic Oath, right? Doctors have to take before they practice medicine because people's lives are in their hands. Well, if you're a leader in a company, people's well-being is also in your hands, even their survival. They say that the well-being, that the person you report to has a greater impact on your health than your primary care physician. That's actually true. The Mayo Clinic studied that, right? So again, we've just recently written the healing oath for AI. And I don't remember all the terminology, but there's 3 categories. It's first is amor vincit omnia in Latin, which means love conquers all. So the first part is operating from a place of love. What does that mean? To amplify love into the world through AI. Second is malus eradicare, root out evil. And how can we not participate in anything that would be clearly defined as evil, and eradicate, and use AI to actually eradicate evil where it exists. And then, what's the third one? The third one is always challenging. Amor vincit omnia, malus eradicare. No, the third one is love. The first one is, first do no harm, just like in the Hippocratic Oath. Second is root out evil, and the third is operate from a place of love. And I think principles like that have to be adopted, anytime we're using it and developing it. I think that's going to be vital for AI.
In just a second, I'm going to open it up to comments and questions from our guests. But that last comment reminds me of a conversation we were having over lunch today, and sort of a lament about all of the evil that AI is already being used to do, election processes being just one example. But the question that came to my mind that I didn't have the opportunity to ask at that point was, yes, and how can we harness AI in that battle for good? So with that said...
Sheila, could I just give an example of that? I wanted to do
Sure.
that if I could do that. It's an amazing project in Finland called the Upright Project. And what they're doing with AI is that they're able to calculate the positive and negative externalities of any company without relying on their internal data. So there's enough information out there, and there's a way that you can harness it so that you can take any company in the world and you can measure its positive and negative impacts, external impacts on the world, and it's like instant transparency. And it's against that background that you can work with that, and you could basically reward the positive externalities, and you could inhibit the negative ones. If AI can do that, then what a positive effect that would be. So there's a great example of harnessing AI for good, and could have tremendous repercussions. Instant transparency.
I think that's a beautiful illustration also of the fact that AI is a tool. And it's a mean to an end. That end ultimately depends on the human being. Yeah. And in that sense, again, AI is another tool, and we can't expect it to solve it and to save us from ourselves.
I will say,
just
go
one
ahead,
word.
Raj.
A phrase I've seen recently is collective brilliance. Instead of AI, if you think about it as collective brilliance, this is what we've all learned and known over thousands of years. We have access to that. So that's a beautiful thing, right? So if we can think about it in that way.
I will say, I continue to teach at the college level, and as an educator, I've been incorporating attention to AI in all of my courses and engagement, critical engagement with it. And I see so many of my colleagues turning away, afraid, distraught, retiring early because they don't want to deal with it, retreating to paper and pencil. And I teach writing. I teach first-year writing is one of the kinds of things I do. But I see this as, yes, a threat and an incredible opportunity to figure out what does education for the human mean in this new era. We thought it was these things. If we no longer need natural intelligence to do these things for us, what are we educating for? What might that look like? It's an incredible challenge, and we're not all up for it, but I find it incredibly exciting.
I think on this aspect of education, to ask the right questions, that might become the new superpower, but to ask the right questions, you already need to have a solid foundation in knowledge. And the second aspect is that only if you know and if you are an expert, you can actually control and verify if what you're given is genius or garbage. So I think in that sense, education will be maybe more subtle and more complex, but it will also be much more important, because as our tools are becoming ever more sophisticated, their answers are becoming ever more convincing and eloquent. So you really, really need to know and be extremely vigilant in digesting whatever you're getting as an answer. And in that sense, the workplace is undergoing a very dangerous transition, because there are various reports showing that the entry-level jobs, like all the junior positions, they're being cut for cost saving, but every expert today started out as a junior. So in a couple of years, when all of the experts of today, they will have retired. So who is then left to control the sophisticated AI outputs? So I think that is a very clear, very practical, and very concrete threat that is out there. And we're walking in that direction with the ostrich logic of, I don't see the problem, and that's why the problem doesn't exist. Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that pipeline issue is really important. And I was thinking, as you were talking about education, that maybe one way to think about our task is to educate worthy interlocutors with AI.
the other thing on that aspect of why education might become ever more important and also on worthy interlocutors, in the past, a lot of the teacher's role has been captured by conveying and channeling a lot of information. But maybe now teachers have more time and attention span freed up to inspire, to be role models. Because if you think back at your own education time, at your school time, the teachers that you remember are not the one that taught you necessarily what was algebra, but those that inspired you, those that showed you something inside yourself that you could not have learned in a book. And in that sense, I think the scope of the classroom and maybe also the field of education is going to go to another level. But again, that requires human intent.
Okay, I'm going to...
I want to just share one short thing. No, sorry.
No, I'm going to tell you no, Raj. Because I promised our dear guests an open conversation. And so I want to invite you. You don't need a mic. So if you have a question, just maybe raise your hand or a comment that you want to share. Somebody get us rolling.
It'll just be all AI all the time.
I think it's coming back to this very thorny question of human in the loop. But you need to have knowledgeable humans in the loop. Now that requires another type of education. But also I think it's the human being likes to make short-sighted decisions. So yes, humans will be replaced in the short run because it's cost-saving. But in the long run, and I agree with you, they are becoming ever more sophisticated, the machines, so there will be less and less humans needed. But still, at some point, you need somewhere a human being to verify the output, right? Otherwise, you have machines communicating with machines. So where does this leave us? It's like this cycle, and then you inject in that agentic AI. It's a domino chain, and you trigger it off. And the question is, to which extent do we keep control over that snowball system?